Hello and welcome to our Trade Tuesday special. This is one we've been sitting on for a while, and we're kind of excited because it was recommended to us by a viewer.
Who also happens to be a dear friend.
Oh yeah.
A lovely man.
Good friend.
For those of you who missed the first episode of Trade Tuesday, this is a new segment wherein we're going to be covering some of our favorite trades or recommended trades to us and telling you our opinions on them, as well as if we think you should read them.
Our trade today is Why? The Last Man. Many of you may already know what this series is, but for those of you who don't, it takes place in a modern world, modern being 2002, and pretty much what happens is every single man drops dead, leaving only women, except for Yorick here, who is the last man. Thus, why the last man? And to give you more on the subject would kind of be a huge spoiler, so I think we should talk about things we like without spoiling it, gentlemen. And things we don't like without spoiling it, gentlemen. And then after that, we'll just see what happens.
Maybe spoilers.
Maybe
a little bit
spoilers.
Who would like to start us off?
Red King one.
Red King is...
Why do I always need to start?
Because apparently Guy thinks you should.
Well, for... Let me take this real quick. For Why the Last Man. I definitely thought it was an interesting premise. The idea of, like, all males simultaneously dying at the same time and leaving one behind for unknown circumstances is quite fascinating, especially when you get into the multiple storylines of why people think it happened, where everybody's not sure what is going on or what's happening. The review here that says, this is why God created comic books, that's a bit much. That's a bit much. Again, I have only read this trade, though, and this trade was pretty dang good. I really enjoyed the story build-up, the character development, because they kind of, well, they gave you enough character development that, honestly, this Yorick, I kind of hate him right now. That's because he's kind of a pretentious prick who's like the last man on Earth. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense. But overall, I did really enjoy this. This was a really good recommendation, and I do need to finish this series so that I can get a full grasp of the characters and how they actually develop throughout the entire story.
All right, Guy, your opinion? Yeah.
Well, this is actually my third time reading Why the Last Man. The first time I read it, I believe the gentleman who actually recommended that we do this video gave me the digital files for it. So I read it on my computer. I reread it again with the rest of the gang just to kind of refresh my memory. And Red King is right. The person who says that this is the reason God created comics might have been exaggerating a bit. But for when it came out, I mean, a lot of writers weren't doing this kind of style of almost like real life type comics. I mean, you had a few Warren Ellis, Alan Moore, they went towards the more like darker, more human side of comics. But to touch on something that Red King says, where Yorick, the protagonist for most of this, is rather unpleasant. Like,
I'd say pretentious, really.
It's a noteworthy feat because most of the time we get heroes who right off the bat we like in some capacity. Even Constantine, who's kind of a prick. Like, we like him because he's a prick.
That's true.
But we start this off, and Yorick is just a person. He's an actual person that you can meet in real life that you would maybe like or dislike in real life, who has real life problems. Again, these are extraordinary circumstances, but all of the characters feel very grounded, very human. And I think Brian came on, that's where this series shines most for him, is the characterizations. As Red King also mentioned, character development is really impressive because we do see Yorick begin to shed some of that pretentiousness a little bit.
That kind of childish behavior.
In the ongoing series, in the next couple of volumes, we actually see that kind of come to a head, see him have to come to terms with this childish behavior and what it means for him and stuff like that. And again, we get into some pretty deep emotional plight and such, and I think that's always been where the comic was strongest. I mean, don't get me wrong, the story is fantastic, seeing how people deal with the aftermath of all of the men disappearing, seeing how they explain it to themselves, seeing how they group together, how they cope, seeing how people change. One of the big themes in this issue especially, because Yorick's sister changes after the loss of all the men. Yorick comes across a camp of women who aren't exactly what they seem. Like, there's a lot of not so much duplicity, but layers. So you see people when you know trauma happens or crisis happens, they change or they reveal their inner selves or their inner desires, stuff like that. And I thought, you know, all of it's a really great character study. So I would definitely recommend it.
To finish us off, Mr. Hueth.
Everything that's I want to touch on the this is why God created comic books things. I agree with both of them. Very, very overzealous review of this. Like, this is some dude who was, like, tweaked out of his mind. Just, this is why God created comic books. That and the Velociraptor demons. I really enjoyed this. I actually ended up picking up all of the trades after I read this. Half of it was kind of like, okay, let's read a little bit. And then once I started reading even more, I'm like, this is a series I'd like to have. Is it the greatest thing I've ever read? Maybe not. But it's definitely one of the best. And this trade right here is really, really good. I don't know what else to say that hasn't already been talked about. Some positives that I really like about it is the humanization of every single character. There's only a couple of them that I'm all like, really? This is like that character. But then you look at the character as a whole and you realize that's part of the character to be not human. So that, like, once the series may go on, they may explore the human side of that character and you'll learn more and feel more. And I think it's a really, really smart way to do your characters. And I wouldn't say it's a strong female cast in the fact there's only one man. So it's an all-female cast except for one man and a monkey. But
I like the monkey.
Honestly, it's good to see, like, female characters that aren't like always good and always bad and very human, and that's
nice, well-rounded.
Yeah, it's refreshing. Some of them are more well-rounded than others, but
that's life.
And it's also one of those things that all comic books suffer. Like, sometimes characters aren't as well-rounded as other characters, and it's just sometimes it happens. Do we have any major negatives that we'd like to talk about?
You know, to be honest, I really can't think of a major negative. Maybe what you pointed out with, like, you know, we had some stereotypical character ideas, but overall, it wasn't like, you know, like some comics that we've read before where, like, they have disjointed storyline. It definitely made sense through the steps they went and, like, the people you kind of looked at to build the background on it. So, for me, there's really no major negative except that review. That's the only thing I got. But other than that, like, it's just minor things. It's like some characters are just a little bit over the top. Some of the stuff that happens is just a little, it's just a little too hokey, but then it comes right back and it pulls it back down to earth and you're like, oh, okay, well, I can see where this is coming from now. And so it's, I don't know, it's interesting, and it definitely still pulls you in even when you get to the end of the trade and you're like, I still don't know what is going on and how this event occurred. I want to find out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't really have anything negative to say about the series. I thoroughly enjoy and love this series. I think Brian K. Vaughan's writing is really sharp, especially if you're currently reading Saga. You'll know he has a really good grasp on, like, maintaining characters, maintaining storyline, maintaining momentum even. You know, you would expect from a first trade for things to be kind of slow, but I don't know how to say it. Not a lot happens, sure, but it never feels slow. It feels like a natural progression for the story. Like, he's not trying to rush Yorick along, and he's also not taking too much time to sort of, you know, like, revel in these ideas. Yeah, it's a natural progression for how the character's, you know, moving along, his journey, stuff like that. I mean, overall, I think it's a really, really solid first volume, and a lot of volumes suffer from that. Like, the first one is just kind of inconsistent. This one is right on the money all the way through.
Yeah, I only have one gripe with it, and it's a huge spoiler, so I'm not going to go into it. So, yeah.
Well, how about this? How about if you don't want to hear these spoilers, as soon as he starts moving his lips, cover your ears, or turn down the volume.
We'll give you a second.
We will warn you of spoiler.
Okay, so the major villain in this is, I don't even remember her name, but she is a Amazon in the fact that she hates the patriarchy and all that, and she brings up really good ideas of modern day society, but she is such a straw man, like, villain in this sense. Like, she's all like, the patriarchy is blah blah blah, I'm gonna kill anyone who disagrees with me. and like she's just such a narrow-minded villain, and she could have been fleshed out and become more like, I hate to say relatable, in the fact that even I understand where she's coming from. I understand her hatred, all that, and I understand that she's supposed to be a villain, and we're supposed to not like her. But I think it'd be even better if she was the villain that brings up amazing points and is like really relatable, and like you really like her, and you're like, oh god, she's the villain. Like this is gonna come to a terrible head. However, they did need a villain for this, and I think it was a strong angle to go in, especially on the first trade, that they went in strong with the Amazonian philosophy. But it's just like, I wish she was written a little bit better, because it's just one of those like straw man feminist argument characters, and like
all those poor boobs. No, I agree. I totally agree, because it was definitely one-dimensional, and that kind of was like, I kind of expected that from a villain, but it was the other characters that she was around,
yes,
that made her not so much of a problem for me.
It's the fact that there's tons of life on the Earth, but it revolves around the sun, and there's no life on the sun, so it's kind of boring.
Yeah, and that's what happened. You didn't know?
I love your face. Just like,
What?
why? You seem like you have things to say on that front.
All I'd say is I disagree. I don't want to go into it.
I think we should go into it.
I
think it'd be fun for everyone.
No, I really just think given her position, not even in the story, but like world-wise, as leader of the Amazons and stuff like that, like, she has to realize inherently that her argument is flawed in certain ways, and that the easiest way to keep them in line is a combination of like,
it's tough love,
violence, and then mental programming.
Yeah.
And so
Beep, boop, boop, boop.
I guess for me, she didn't read as one-dimensional. She read as determined, or delusional even. But I don't know.
That's a good point. But I think that's where I found her one-dimensional. Like she could have been so much more interesting and more compelling, but she was just delusional and crazy. But she may not have actually been crazy. However, it is a good point that she does use like mental programming, and she uses a lot of methods that are really interesting. But there's one scene where we're still in a spoiler mode, so this is she actually has Hero kill a girl when Hero's all like, no, we can't do that, and she's all like, no, it's your sisterhood, blah blah blah, and then like she whispers in Hero's ear after she's like, I hate being patriarchal like that, and it reminds me, I'm like, it's so hypocritical to be so like, it sounds so weird, but so much like an angry delusional man in a world that's trying to survive without men. And I think that is very interesting. Just the characterization is what makes me upset. She could have been so much more interesting and could have had more to her. However, she's not a terrible villain. I don't want you guys to leave thinking I didn't like her as a villain. She's an amazing villain. She brings up good points. She brings up a lot of really cool like ideas about a post-apocalyptic like a cult, pretty much. And it's really interesting. Like I said, the sun has no life, but it has Earth, and that has tons of life and tons of detail to it. And that is a weird analogy to keep coming back to.
It is, and
but,
you keep coming back to it, but it slowly starts to make more sense as we get there.
See, it makes sense in my mind, and now I'm just fleshing it out. Alright, so, if there's nothing else we want to talk about, I think it's time to get to our numerical values, because things are only as good as the numbers we give them. Math.
And you had to go last time, so go first now.
I'm going to give this a solid 8 out of 10. I would highly recommend this series. Not the best trade out of them, because after all, I've read all of them, and it gets much better than this. However, this is still exceptionally good. It's much better than Thunderbolts, which I've read the entire thing, and I kind of regret it.
That's a sad life.
But, still, highly recommended, 8 out of 10. Guy?
I'm actually 100% with you there. I'm almost tempted to give it a higher rating, but given its place in the series, and it is hard for Shannon and I, having read the whole thing, to kind of disassociate it from
it's
the series as a whole, knowing there's more along the way.
That's how I stay objective.
So it's a really good beginning, but again, comparatively, it gets so much better as it gets fleshed out because you come to love the characters, care for them. You get much more deeper portrayals of characters. But again, 8's not a bad score. It's a very solid, really, really solid score. Definitely worth the read. I mean, you should definitely pick it up.
I definitely give this 8 smug Batmans out of 10. I definitely agree with their assessment. 8 is a solid number because I have not read further into the series, so I only know this. And despite like the few things we just brought up and anything like that, it was a solid series, and it's something I would definitely continue to read. But overall, like I agree with what they say. It is a good series. I recommend you pick it up too. Read through the whole thing. Fall in love with the whole story and the characters. It's fantastic.
All right. Well, that leaves us with an average score of a solid 8 out of 10. If you are at all interested in a series that is already completed and you can just pick up the trades, this is actually a very abundant one to come by. It's relatively cheap on Amazon too, which is how I got all of it. I ended up getting the deluxe versions, which has the first 2 trades in the first trade, and honestly, it was like what, maybe $13 to $15.
But thank you all for joining us on this fan-based Trade Tuesday.
If you like, please like, comment, subscribe. I don't know about you guys, but I think after we all finish the series, and by we all I mean this guy right here, we should do a overall assessment of why as a whole.
Absolutely. So be looking forward to that in the future. And you know, we did this one as Red King said on a fan submission. So please, if you've got a trade that you've been thinking about picking up, or one that you really liked and you want us to bring attention to, go on ahead and leave us comments, on our Facebook, on our Twitter, on anything, and then we'll do our best to pick it up and get to them as quickly as possible, much quicker than we got to this one.
All right. Well, as always, remember who you are, what you are.
Don't go causing any trouble out there in that crazy world.
And always remember, be sorry for the boobs. Don't ever cut them off. That's wrong.
Just too vicious.
What he said.
Also,
No.
revolutionsf.com. You need to tone it down. Like this is not why God created comic books. In fact, I think this is why Brian K. Vaughan created this comic book, because it was good. And he's like, hey, I have a good idea, but God